We're live.
I think we're live.
Nancy. Namaste, everyone. Thank you all for joining our second webinar, part of Northeast Hindu Yuva, Hinduism in the 21st Century webinar series. My name is Tanmay Vadipati, and I am the co-coordinator for this series. I am a rising junior at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and I am also the vice president of UMass Hindu Yuva. Hindu Yuva is a student-run, nonprofit, socio-cultural organizations with a presence in over 35 universities in the United States. Our aim is to practice, promote, and preserve our Hindu identity while growing up in the United States. Before I begin introducing our topic and moderator for this evening, I want to thank you all for watching last week's webinar about Ayurveda, which had more than 1,000 viewers within the last 7 days. Throughout tonight's event, viewers watching live on YouTube and Facebook are more than welcome to comment questions they have about our topic, and we will be choosing unique questions for our moderator to ask our speaker. Without further ado, our topic for tonight is Let the Music Speak, a modern reawakening of the Hindu classics, which will be moderated by Anjali Sukhvasi. Anjali is a rising sophomore at Stanford University, majoring in symbolic systems. Brought up in Pennsylvania and a member of Northeast Hindu Yuva, Anjali has successfully completed her Bharatanatyam, Arangetram, and her Kuchipudi and Rangapravesam prior to beginning her college studies. She is currently under the tutelage of Acharya Srimati Indra Kadambi and has grown up learning Carnatic music as well. Thank you, Anjali, for being our moderator today.
Thank you, Tanmay. We are extremely excited to have Srimati Rukmini Vijayakumar as our speaker for our second webinar. She is the artistic director of Raadha Kalpa Dance Company and the director of LshVa, a creative space for artists in the heart of Bangalore. She is the founder of the Raadha Kalpa method, an educational system for Bharatanatyam that is based on the idea of neutrality. Rukmini ji's approach to Bharatanatyam is dedicated, rigorous, and layered. She has presented her work as a soloist all over the world, including at prestigious venues such as the Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival, Drive East New York City, and the Korzo Theater. Recently, she played the Goddess of Love in Sukanya, produced by the Royal Opera House in London. Rukmini ji, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we'll just get right into it. How would you define the Hindu classical arts? What makes these arts both classical and Hindu?
Firstly, in the idea of Hinduism itself, let me talk about that first and what it means to me. what makes you, if you wear a bindi, it doesn't make you Hindu. If you go to a temple every weekend, it doesn't make you a Hindu necessarily. If you don't go to a temple, it doesn't mean you're not a Hindu. If you follow any one thing specifically, it doesn't make you Hindu or non-Hindu. The idea is that Hinduism was a name given to us for the people who lived in this region by Western culture that didn't understand the way of life that we led. So I prefer to call it Sanatana Dharma, or which encompasses all these traditions and philosophies that exist in this land. And there is not just one philosophy, which is just Advaita. And although I know Advaita the most, there are other philosophies that contest the way our existence is in this world. So how creation came to be, or why we exist, or duties of life. But what encompasses the overall thing in this land is that all of these philosophies within themselves, they don't just, whether it's Advaita or Sankhya, Advaita or Vishishta Advaita, or whatever they are, they don't just, they're not just about rules of life, but they're more about a way of living. And there are no specific right or wrongs, but from what I understand is that intent is the most important thing. And this intent transcends just the intent is not transcends everything else. It's the most important thing in terms of how we live our lives. So whether we do our work or study, or earn money, or whether we're in business, or it could be anything. It could be the most modern contemporary job in the world, but your intent is what, and your thing makes you what we would think as Hindu, and so in that respect, anybody can be Hindu. And with it just means the right attitude towards living, the right kind of lifestyle that makes you productive contributor in society, that makes you less selfish, that makes you a good human being. And this is what is Sanatana Dharma for me. So when this is there, it encompasses everything, like arts, culture. So it's a lifestyle. It's not just things that you do. It doesn't mean that religion has a certain number of things and all these things fall outside the prerogative of religion. So in India, Sanatana Dharma means how you eat your food, how you wake up in the morning and pay respect to Mother Earth, or how you, what does your dance and music speak of, what do your arts speak of. And so because of that, because it is a way of life, it encompasses arts and music that originated in India by virtue of it being a part of our lifestyle, or our living. So yes, that's that. I hope that clarifies the question.
Absolutely. So when we think of Bharatanatyam or Kathak or Kuchipudi or Carnatic music or Hindustani classical music, why do you think those art forms are specifically associated with as Hindu arts, or associated with Sanatana Dharma?
I think that, see, the philosophy of Sanatana Dharma is inclusivity. Okay, so it means that divinity exists within everything around us. We have that from like we touch the floor, like irrespective of whether you're a dancer, you touch the floor in the morning. My grandmother used to say, touch the floor and touch your eyes, because you have to do that before you get off your bed, So as kids, I remember like reaching outside of the bed and touching the floor before putting my feet on the floor. So it is something. And then when you were having a shower, we would say this thing, Gange cha Yamune chaiva Godavari Saraswati Narmade Sindhu Kaveri Jalesmin Sanidam. So it just means that everything that you receive in the world, you have a certain respect for, because we presume that this divinity exists in everything. Like when we say Ayudha Puja or something like that, right? We have Ayudha Puja, Lakshmi Puja. But Ayudha Puja means, now when you see in India, when you say Ayudha Puja during the time of the Navratri festival where we honor the three goddesses, everything goes into Ayudha Puja, from the computer to the cell phone to weights in the gym to the car, and every single thing, microwave, refrigerator, everything goes into Ayudha Puja, because all these things enable us to function more efficiently as human beings. So we respect the divinity within them, because as humans we work within the laws of nature that already pre-exist, and we put these laws together to create a computer and a thing. But the laws of nature pre-exist before we make a computer, right? So in the sense that we respect that there is something that is divine that facilitates all of the functionality of the universe that we currently exist in. So in that respect, in the Natya Shastra, when you think of it, the story is that we have stories for everything, which are metaphorical and symbolic. So in the Natya Shastra, it says that when there was a lot of strife in the world at the end of the Dwapara Yuga, because we used to divide time based on yugas in the Vedantic calendar, I think. So there was the Satya Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga, and Kali Yuga. So these are the 4 divisions of time, which are thousands, if not millions of years. I'm unsure of how long each yuga is meant to be. So the story goes that at the end of the Dwapara Yuga, there was a lot of strife in the world, and rulers were no longer taking care of the welfare of their people, and people were behaving selfishly, and there was not there's a list that goes on, like things that were not okay, which seems a lot better than the world we exist in right now. So it said that at that time, Indra and the other gods went to Brahma and said, we need something that can make the general public understand the ideas of right living or Vedanta or this through something that can be seen and heard at the same time. So when they said something that can be seen and heard at the same time, obviously theater and performing arts were what Brahma came up with, and then he gave it to their thing, and so on and so forth. And then Shiva added dance, and so it became this all-encompassing performative experience that people can watch. So obviously, perhaps if we had television at that time, Brahma would have given that as the solution. So, but now, so he gave performing arts, So all of us were there, and I mean, so this idea of performance and theater and music also came with the intention of not a personal agenda, but it came from an idea of how do we entertain and take the minds off of people, off of this struggle of life, and let them engage in something for a little while, such that they experience this higher truth, not just by virtue of content, but by virtue of just enjoying something for a little while. So the form itself is layered. So Bharatanatyam is layered. So there is the lyrics that may have something about Shiva, and then there is the the idea of, there'll be something that's funny. Sometimes it's just a comical thing of Shiva and Parvati fighting. So there is nothing that's literally like saying, I surrender to you, oh great God, nothing like that. So people will be laughing because Shiva and Parvati are fighting, and it reflects their own marital experience with their husbands or wives. And for a little while, your mind is off. But then it everything's attributed to a divine. So then it doesn't exist within the confines of our limited desires that we have in this world. It goes beyond that and says that it's immaterial, like the life we live in, we must live. So I guess it takes a long time to explain because there's so many other things that go into it. But overall, because there is this string of divinity that goes, it's not just Indian arts. This also exists in Indonesian and Thai and all these art forms as well. And yeah, I guess this idea that this divinity becomes the main thing is what makes these art forms, unify these art forms, though they're very different in their own way. Yeah.
Thank you for that beautiful answer. So how were you introduced to dance? And what made you realize that you wanted to pursue dance throughout your life?
I was introduced to dance because of my mom, which I think is the usual case amongst most young dancers. And my mom used to dance as a hobby. And she used to go to dance class when I was 4 or 5, and I insisted that I want to go with her. And when you're young, you're really enamored by this, this performance and, this dancing. And I don't think I knew anything about anything then. So I just went to dance class. And yeah, after many years, I don't think it was an option in my mind because I was a very, very nerdy child, if you like to say, because I was very bent on getting good grades and doing well in my exams. I liked math and physics a lot. And I was very happy when I got into university 1 year younger than the normal person. And then my mother refused to let me go because I was only 17. And I said, what kind of mother would not let their child go when they're only 17 and they're in university? And, I've also aced, they send these, I don't know if they do them anymore. They send these like calculus and some kind of exams before you go in to place you into the class or something like that. Mm. So I did well in those exams, and I had, I had all these credits, and I got into Carnegie Mellon, and my mom's like, nothing doing, you can't go. So after a lot of tears and fighting and everything, she said, do whatever you want for a year, but you can't go. So until you're 18, you're not leaving the house. And so I was dancing. I mean, I was dancing even before that. Mm-hmm. I was dancing a lot even before that. Even in my 11th and 12th, I don't think I wrote any exams except my final exams because I was dancing so much, I missed all my exams. Mm-hmm. And so
and
when
Bharatanatyam that you were dancing?
Yeah, I was dancing. So that was basically it. So she said, you have to do whatever you want. So I danced for that year, morning to night. Then I deferred my admission and danced for another year, and deferred again and danced for another year. So the third time I was dancing, I said, I need to apply to, like maybe dance college or something like that, because I can't just continue on like this. There was some side of me that was like, I need some formal education. It was not something that my parents actually enforced. I think they would have been fine even if I didn't go to college. So, which is very strange for Indian parents. So they So so this was something that was self-imposed. So I applied to dance college, and that's when I went to the Boston Conservatory, and then yeah.
Wow. And so was it at that point when you had gone to the Boston Conservatory where you decided that you would pursue dance for your entire life, or was that just something that happened along the way?
I think the decision happened because of how dance took over. Because the questions they asked me when I said I want to go to do architecture was that, do you know what architecture is? But it's, I don't know if they were just conspiring to keep me home in India, or if it was if it was something else. But they were um, they were very adamant about the fact that I should give dance a consideration, probably because I was dancing so much even before that. And they said, you know, this is an option, you can do it, take a year off, do that, and then go if you want to. So I think at the end of the year, if I decided to go and do architecture, they would have been fine. But I think that at the end of the year, I was left confused and I didn't know whether I wanted to do architecture or if it was dance that I wanted to do. So it kind of I don't know. It just made this option open for me, and I was allowed to think that this was also possible. And within the scope of that, I think that I chose it. So it was one of the hardest decisions I made in my life, because my family, everyone has gone to like Yale or some. My brother went to Carnegie Mellon and then MIT and Harvard, and I was, and I'm a dancer, and I hadn't even gone to college for 3 years. So it was it was one of the hardest decisions that I made. Yeah.
While you were at the Boston Conservatory, did you explore any other dance forms other than Bharatanatyam?
Yeah, of course. I'd started doing ballet and some jazz, because when a large portion of my family lives in the US. And so over the summers, I would go and stay with one of my cousins who's in LA and spend the entire summer in a dance studio over there in California. And when I was in India, I'd started with a ballet teacher here alongside my Bharatanatyam teachers and yoga teacher and all of that. So this was before, this was in high school actually. So, and obviously when I didn't have anything else to do, that's all I did the whole day. So when I didn't have school anymore, so I would go shuttle from one class to the next, to the next, to the next. So I would be in ballet class, and Bharatanatyam class, and the other Bharatanatyam class, and yoga class, not in that order specifically, but I would do all of it and then go home and dance and practice obsessively till like 11 a.m. 11, 12 p.m., 1 a.m. sometimes. Go to sleep and wake up again at 5:30 to go to yoga class. So I had filled my days with this learning, even before I went to college. I don't know whether I can't call it university because it's a conservatory. So it's so before I went to college, and I think that it was definitely because of my exposure to these other forms that I chose to be a dancer. I'm not sure that at the teenager that I was, I would have given it, maybe where I am now, I would say, yeah, you should. Like just Bharatanatyam is enough. But the teenager that I was, I don't think I would have given it a chance if I didn't have this other learning as well. Yeah.
And having pursued those other art forms as alongside Bharatanatyam outside of India in America, what was your experience pursuing Bharatanatyam outside of India in America?
I didn't pursue Bharatanatyam there at all. I didn't
Okay.
do any Bharatanatyam in college.
Okay.
So I did only I was a modern major. So college was similar to what I was doing in India, only it was in one place and timetables were already arranged. So in India, I had to arrange everything with different teachers and leave at 6 a.m. and come back at 9 p.m. after driving through the city, which was possible at that time because there was no traffic. Now it's impossible. There's absolutely no way I would be able to do it if it was now. So I would go from one teacher to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. In college, it was all in one place, which was amazing. And I didn't have to arrange everything, and I would just show up and dance the whole day, which was fantastic. So it was, I think that in college, I did ballet and modern, obviously, every day. But then we also did a lot of somatic technique, like Alexander technique for 2 years and Pilates for 2 years. And then we had this thing called styles, which, I mean, you could take. That was our only elective because it is a conservatory. Everything else is just specified for you. So then I did tap. I think tap I did over the summer, but then I did jazz and African for 2 years each. And but then we learned choreography and I don't know, Laban and so many other things that I would have never been able to learn if I had not gone. And I think that I wasn't sure at that time whether I want to do Bharatanatyam or I want to, pursue this modern or be a contemporary dancer. We're talking about like between 2004 and 2008. So 10 years ago, this neo-contemporary art forms were still like kind of finding their footing. So even in college, what modern we learned was slightly more of the classical, like Graham and Taylor and that kind of a modern thing. So it wasn't as how contemporary dance is now. And I think in the US, it's still a bit more, traditional than in Europe. Even the modern training, it's more classical modern. But I think that I needed that time away because every time it wasn't like I wasn't dancing. I was dancing and I was in a place in Bharatanatyam even before I left because I had like 3 years morning to night of doing Bharatanatyam, plus the 15 years before that. It wouldn't have been 15 years, like 10 years before that. So it's, these 3 years were spent after my Arangetram, not before. And in India, we don't, like my teacher didn't let me do my Arangetram until I'd already done like my Vidvat exam. So it wasn't like the first Margam that I'd learned or something like that. So I'd already had to learn like 3 or 4 full Margams, learn to put talam and sing all of it very badly. And so we'd already learned all this and I'd done my Arangetram. And after that, I spent 3 years. So I was in a good place when it came to Bharatanatyam. Obviously, I had a lot more to learn, but I was choreographing by that time. And by the time I was 19, I'd already choreographed my first 90-minute solo production. And so I had some knowledge in terms of the traditional form of Bharatanatyam. So, and even in the course of the year, because it was a conservatory and a performing arts school, we had 5 months off. Unlike a regular other college, it was nearly 5 months. It would be 4.5 months. So in December, January, we got almost 1 month, and the summers were 3.5 months. Because I don't know why, but I think that it would be because as dancers, we would go back and also be able to engage and perform and do other things. Because during the course of school, we weren't allowed to perform. We had to study. We could only perform in conservatory productions, which happened only twice or thrice a year. So I think that the time that I was away, unlike other students who went back to their dance studios and did their modern and ballet training again, I would come back and I would spend all my days in Narmada Auntie's house. Mm-hmm. So basically I would camp out in her house until she kicked me out. and then I'd go back again. So I think that there was it was a good balance, because it wasn't like I wasn't doing Bharatanatyam, and I have an obsessive nature. So even when I was in the conservatory, I remember going like we would start class at 8, I would go at 6 and do either my full margam or all my karanas, or do my Adava practice before we danced for another 10 hours. So I would make sure I did that at least twice or thrice a week. So it's, yeah, so I didn't do Bharatanatyam there. I did Bharatanatyam only with my teachers in India.
And as we'd come home for summer break and things like that, could you see influences of the new styles you were learning being brought into your Bharatanatyam practice?
What this did was I began to see space differently. I began to see choreography differently. I began to understand my body extremely well. Which was not in the training that I got before, because when we were, I remember when I was 13 or something like that, when I was in a dance intensive, and when we were kids, dance intensives were long, not like now, where it's just a week or 2 weeks. Like we hold dance intensives at LshVa, the maximum is 12 days or 13 days. Dance intensives sometimes used to be like a month. Or 3.5 weeks, So I would get knee pain, and I had no idea what was going wrong. I used to have multiple ankle sprains as a teenager. And there were all these things that I wanted to do with my body, and I didn't know how. And obviously, when I did yoga, I understood some things, I understood some things to apply. But there is a difference between knowing it as a separate knowledge and applying it to something that is a dynamic, moving kind of thing, because yoga is about sukham and sthiram. It's about being quiet and still in an asana and then finding the thing. But dance is dynamic. And how do you apply this knowledge of alignment and all of this into dance while you're in movement, And I think the way ballet is structured, and the way it progresses anatomically speaking, brought a lot of awareness for me in that. And in my own school, they had like some anatomy and physiology, which was necessary for dancers. But I was so interested that I took some courses for that they do for the physiotherapists and an occupational therapist in Boston University. So in the end of my junior year, I stayed back. So they do those courses over the summer for some of them who need to retake the course, or, so that's why I got permission, and I did some of those things over 2 summers at Boston University and studied anatomy and physiology. So it was great because I'd spent 2 years realigning and understanding my body. And then 3 years, I guess, 3 years. And then at the end of it, I again did this. So there were things that I learned about my body, the functionality, and all of that started translating to Bharatanatyam. But it wasn't easy. It's not like it just happened automatically. It happened over the course of like 10 years after.
Right.
Like from when I came back from college from 2008 till like, I think maybe 2018, I spent a lot of time analyzing this, which is why I said I announced the Raadha Kalpa method only like earlier this year, so it's taken me a long time to put together all of this learning. So it wasn't that it influenced me from an external kind of vocabulary way, because I was very clear that I wanted to keep my Bharatanatyam, and I want to keep my contemporary work, my contemporary dance. And at the beginning for me, they existed in completely separate worlds, because what I expected of my body, my mind, my intention as a modern dancer was completely different than as a Bharatanatyam dancer, you know. So even when I created something that was modern or contemporary, I would make it separate, present it separately, say it separately, and then I would do my Bharatanatyam like as, you know, like traditional margams and this kind of thing. So it didn't influence it in the way that you would think that it did. It changed in my body, and so I had an ease in some movements, like in connecting movements, especially like with the use of momentum. I began using the idea of momentum to transition even within Bharatanatyam. How I approach space, that's a very big deal. That's a very big thing, I think, in terms of choreography. The way I approach direction, dynamic changes, all of these things definitely. And it wasn't something that I did on purpose. It was something that happened automatically. It wasn't a conscious choice, I'm going to change this. So when people said your Bharatanatyam looks different, I would actually watch to check why it looks different, because this is how I knew how to do it. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does. So you came from India to Boston to learn contemporary dance. So then what do you have to say for, you know, kids that are growing up here? And a lot of times parents will say you should learn, you know, Bharatanatyam or Carnatic music so you can stay connected to your roots. Do you agree with that? Do you think that is something that helps people connect to their roots?
See, I think I'm going to be very honest here. There is, with children growing up in the West, especially, right? I mean, I lived there briefly when I was young, but then my parents wanted us to grow up in India, and they just moved back when I was really young. So this was never a point of contention for us. But from being there and seeing my cousins growing up, and you know, everybody else, a large portion of my family that's there, as well as a lot of the children that I interact with now in workshops when I travel, is that there is this thing that you learn Carnatic music and Bharatanatyam to stay connected to your roots is a very big part. I say that there are two things. They're two separate things, right? Things about our culture, like the other things that I was saying, like you touch the floor and touch your eyes, or you say Gange Chamuni Chaiva when you're breathing, or understanding, like we're taught that divinity exists in everything around us. Like we're taught to respect a tree. We're not allowed to kick your book with your feet, you know. You're not allowed to kick anything with your feet. Mm-hmm. It just means that everything is divine, right? These kind of things come from upbringing. They come from the house. You can't learn this in a dance or music class. The dance or music class reinforces these cultural ideas, perhaps in the form of a movement or, you know, like a singing musical vocabulary. But I don't remember ever that my teacher telling me the stories of Devi or Krishna or what the symbol of this. All this I got from my house. My grandmom, my mom, my dad, my aunt, like these are the people that would tell me the symbolism of anything. So if I was going, and I know that growing up in the West, there are many children who say, oh, we're just dancing this Devi and Krishna stories and I don't understand them and they don't think, and that's fair enough. I think that's a very valid point. Because you have not been able to connect to this through your lifestyle or through the surroundings that you're in. You know, in India, even if you're not Hindu, if you're another religion, you are still more connected to it. because you are surrounded by it. All your friends will either do this, and we also there's a cohesiveness here, that you understand these other religions and you participate in them, because it's just a puja is a puja, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter where the puja is from, whether it's a Muslim puja, Christian puja, is puja, and we should ideally have the same respect, and we call it puja. So it's just an event or a celebratory event of the divine, or whatever it is, you know. It really doesn't matter. So I think that these values come from the house. And then, as far as Bharatanatyam or Carnatic music, yes, they do have cultural standing, but they must also be seen as art forms. That's actually something that is is problematic in the West, because when they're seen as, you learn your culture, go to Bharatanatyam class, go to Carnatic music class because you learn something, you'll keep up our culture and tradition. Their value as an art form is suddenly lost.
Mm-hmm.
They are just also art forms. They do come from this culture, yes, but they are not limited by the culture completely. And they also exist as art forms, separate of the culture also, because there is a technique to Bharatanatyam, there's a technique of movement. Yes, the gestural vocabulary comes from this idea of spirituality. So there is the weight in your feet, like, as opposed to this. Every art form has something that's beautiful, you know, like with jazz, there's something that's so confrontational, and that's amazing because it came from, you know, people who was struggling to assert themselves and be seen as human beings, you know. So it's there's something really confrontational, and that confrontation is extremely beautiful because it's the essence of the form itself. You can't take it out of it. So with Bharatanatyam and the Indian art forms, it's something that's more down. It's like, here we're not, there's nothing confrontational, there's nothing gesturally or physically that becomes like that, you know. So it's more about something that goes inward, or it's retrospective or spiritual. So yes, this does exist, but this is also a skill and a technique that you're learning, and it must be seen as art, just as open as an option as any other art that would be available there, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think that it's just about culture, because you can get the culture in your house and you can go and learn modern dance, or you can go and learn Western singing, and there's no reason that you can't um, you know, still be Sanatana Dharmic while you're a Western singer. There's nothing, I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't want your parents to kill me.
Oh no. So we're getting questions from the audience now. So
Yeah.
one of the questions is, recently there's a lot of people will say that, you know, we have to keep Bharatanatyam or any dance tradition to being pure and devotional and religious, seeing that Bharatanatyam had originally originated as a temple art form, as well as many of our art forms. So can you speak to that? How do you feel about people who feel that it should be kept purely devotional and religious?
I have a problem with this word religious, because it automatically encompasses something that is limiting somewhere in the mindset. Like I said, I see it as Sanatana Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
And Sanatana Dharma is not a religion per se, as we perceive as religions, because if you say religion, automatically in my mind I think rules, and I have an aversion to it immediately.
Right.
When you say Bharatanatyam or Kathak, of any of these Indian art forms, there is a need for every dancer to understand where it came from before they reject it. What happens now is that they don't understand where it came from. You don't take the time to learn or make a margam. The moment your Arangetram is done, everyone does some fusion choreography. And that I don't accept. I have absolutely no aversion or no problem with people exploring the wealth of Bharatanatyam. You know, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, you cannot, like in physics, right? With science, it's very easy. In science, like you cannot come up with new laws without understanding the old laws because you're studying natural laws, right? And there's a progression to it.
Right.
Like you can't disregard Newton's laws and say quantum laws come alive. That's not possible, right? So you have to say, okay, these laws work in this material universe. And now in this smaller universe, it changes, right? And then someone goes in and says, oh, these laws don't work. Let's work on string theory or let's work on relativity. Like there is a cognizance to what works. And you have to understand that this is what it is before you move on to the next thing. You don't learn multiplication until you learn addition in math. You don't learn calculus until you know multiplication, division, and trigonometry, right? So there is a clear progression. But in Bharatanatyam, or especially in arts, people tend to make a jump. Like you go from just learning these pieces to suddenly questioning them, becoming a choreographer, and rejecting them. You know, you just learned them. You didn't even do anything with them. So there must be a progression. So if you've learned just one margam or two margams, I would say choreograph within the stipulation of tradition or whatever that means according to your teacher. Okay? And it doesn't matter however pig-headed you think your teacher is, go with it. You surrender to her ideas because you don't have the right to question them because you haven't spent as much time on it. So you do it for a while. She says this is the structure of Jatiswaram, trust it and do it. Do the Jatiswaram. And if you say I want to choreograph something, make a Jatiswaram first. Take the next Jatiswaram, make a Jatiswaram, make a Tilana, make a Varnam. And once you have made that, and several of them, then you understand, okay, this is what an Aradi is, this is what rhythmic patterns mean, this is what a Korve is, this is what a Jati is. Then you'll begin to understand where the essence of Bharatanatyam lies. And then read and understand. So if you say this has this spiritual thing and this godly thing, why not understand why it came like that? What is the reason for this to happen? I cannot reject jazz just because it has a confrontational thing. I can't question Graham and say, why is everything like going like this? Why is everything in spirals? Why does everything come from the center? It makes everything look sad and depressing. No, I don't want to do that anymore. So it doesn't make sense because the essence of some of these forms come from a particular intention and base. Every art form must have a reason to exist. Right? You can't take this royal kind of thing out of ballet, it'll stop being ballet. Right? The beauty of that is there because it has a strong essence. You can't take that essence out and expect it to still be what it is, you know? So I think it's important to understand what it is and then question whatever you want. Question it, try to see if I do this. But it's important to understand what exactly you're taking out. What are you removing? What are you changing? Will it be Bharatanatyam if I take this aspect out? Will it be Bharatanatyam if I take this aspect out? Can I change this and will I retain what Bharatanatyam means in the overall sense? Does it stop being Bharatanatyam when I dance to, I don't know, Mozart? Does it stop being Bharatanatyam when I change my costume and I wear denim shorts? Does it stop being Bharatanatyam when I do something else or I add something? But it cannot be from a place of rejection, one, or novelty. It can come from a place for a need to express something, and by virtue of needing to express that, you have to change something because that is not available in this form that is there. Because both those things, both rejection and novelty, are the wrong things, in my opinion, to create something.
Right.
Because you'll never, like, I don't think that it makes sense if I reject that, so I'm going to make this. You have no reason for making it then. So if you're making something, you must make something because you have a dying need to express something. And the only way that you can express it is through this. And when you know the form well, you will find a way to either work within the form or push things in small ways to accommodate this new idea that you have. And there's nothing wrong in doing things like, I'm going to release another video this week that is not at all traditional. Like my last week, I did one on yoga, which is very like about yoga and being inward. This week, I'm doing one that's on reticence and just hesitancy and how we hesitate to express ourselves. But I don't feel that in the traditional form with lyrics and narrative, I can express this idea as well. So I move it to a more bodily expression as opposed to an abhinaya narrative. And that's all. I mean, I do it. I don't think there's anything wrong. But I don't think I would have been able to do it well if I didn't spend that time making all these margams. And I don't reject the margams. I love them. I perform margams all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've been talking a lot about learning and working for a while on one's own art. So our traditional art forms have inbuilt in them the value of a Gurushishya parampara. So having learned these art forms and also having learned at a conservatory, what do you think is the value of this Gurushishya parampara within the framework of classical arts?
See, ideally, the Gurushishya parampara is nurturing. It's also because, fortunately, I had nurturing gurus. Okay, and especially in my second two teachers, both Guru Sundari Santanam and Guru Narmada. And especially with Guru Narmada, because I spent more time with her. Because Sundari Akka, I mean, she was unwell, so I didn't have the opportunity of spending as much time as I would have liked. So there's what happens is that there's a nurturing environment. At no point will I say, Narmada auntie didn't teach me about anatomy. She didn't, I never learned anything, with abhinaya, it didn't work out. Because the environment was nurturing. I would say she was my guru. Same with my yoga teacher. So they were both gurus in the sense that they gave with absolutely no inhibition. They rejoiced in my progress. So whether I went to ballet school and came back, Narmadani would be happy. She'd be like, show me the dance piece. What did you learn? Show me that. So I would go to our house, and because I was also learning ballet at the same time. And the first year when I went back, that whole summer, I spent performing for her cousins. In the evening, she'd call me and she'd say, Ruku, come here, dance your Shankarish degree. And that new ballet thing you learned, can you dance that also? You have the music, can you bring it? So I'd go to her living room and I'd perform in the evening for her, and her cousins. I would hang around. It's very different because now everything is very transactional. And it's two ways. It's both from the teacher as well as the students. there are two things, the guru and the shishya. Very often we say the guru is problematic, but the shishya can also be problematic. Each of us needs to question if we are the problem. We can't question the other person, because that's not that's not our prerogative. We can't question, is my guru problematic? No, we can only say as a shishya, am I problematic? And as a guru, we can say, am I problematic? So I think that the relationship has become toxic because we hold on to the privileges without the duties that need to be done by both sides. In many situations, the relationship has become toxic, and I know of them also, because ideally a guru has to give without expecting. I wrote an article about this in this magazine. You can read it. It's in sanatanayoga.com, and I wrote about Gurushishya. But the guru needs to give without expecting. The shishya also needs to surrender to the learning. And the shishya also needs to give the maximum that they can give for this learning. On the other hand, the guru must also not grab onto the shishya and hold on to them and not let them grow at all outside of their sphere. Because all of us are limited human beings. I can't teach everything in the world to somebody, right? So I can teach whatever I know, but if their learning needs more, obviously they need to learn something from somewhere else. So that's something that we need to accept. But at the same time, the shishya also must stick around to learn everything first before they think that they know everything, right? So there are two sides to this. So when the guru-shishya relationship is good, it's the best way of learning, because I know that with Narmada auntie, right? I would go to a house and I would dance. Then someone else would come, I would continue to dance. Someone else would come, I would continue to dance. And I would sit around, they're learning Jati Swaram, I would dance at the back. They're learning something else, I would dance at the back. Then at 3 o'clock, she'll say, Ruku, go home now. I want to sleep. I think it's okay, auntie. What time shall I come back at 4 o'clock? She'll be like, no, come back at 5:30. I said, okay, I'll come at 4:30. And she wouldn't say anything and she'd be okay. And she had the patience to repeat and encourage that. And she not only encouraged this, she allowed me to be an individual. Like I would choreograph, but I didn't choreograph before I knew anything. I wasn't saying I'm making things, and it's not like I didn't show, like I would show it to her first, and she would give me her comments or make her faces about whatever she thought was bad, and I would force this on her, and it was kind of something that she allowed me to grow into an individual, which is beautiful about having a guru. And I don't think that would have been possible if this relationship didn't exist. But at the same time, I know that I gave my all. If she taught me something, I would go and I would take it without question, and I would do it repeatedly again and again, and I would go back and show it to her. In my mind, I didn't think, oh, this varnam is boring, this is nonsense, nothing. I would go back and I would do whatever she taught me. Same with Sundari Akka. Like I had no questions in what they were saying. I had to surrender to them in order to learn, because if you don't, you can't learn as a shishya. And I used to clean their house. I've washed her dishes, put up her curtains, like served her lunch. Like there are things that you do because they are it's not something that she expected or she asked or anything, but it's different now. There are things on both sides that are absolutely not the same. And I know that's something that's changed from my generation to the next, because I've had this conversation with my dance peers as well. And when it becomes very transactional, the teacher also becomes inhibited, the student also becomes inhibited, and then there's a hovering parent that ensures this relationship is very transactional. So then it becomes problematic. You have to allow, you have to surrender your child. And that's the beauty of the Gurushishya parampara. It's amazing. And you can learn very, very well if you do. And I know many people have experienced the beauty of this with good gurus and good teachers. And I'm not saying there are also situations that you need to like remove yourself from because they're toxic. But in the ideal sense, it's a great way to learn.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience. So you had said earlier that the thing that links Bharatanatyam, for example, to Sanatana Dharma is that inbuilt sense of divinity and exploring divinity. So what is it that an audience member gains from watching, a classical dance performance or a kacheri versus a ballet performance or a jazz performance?
I think it depends on, firstly, we can't put all classical performances under the same umbrella, right? Everyone understands this very well in sport because it's something that's exciting. You don't get the same feeling watching Michael Jordan play in the NBA and a high school basketball match, right? So it's completely different. The feeling is different, the experience is different, everything is different. We have sometimes, as classical dancers and musicians, some of us, very often we think we're so divine and so amazing just because we practice this form. And I think we need to get rid of the superiority complex. We're also just artists, the same as anybody else. I think that I want to speak about rasa after this, but I'll say in the literal sense what the experience is. In a classical performance, and I would also add concert forms, like whether it's modern or I would say contemporary dance, depending on the kind of performance it is more akin to Bharatanatyam than even ballet. In terms of the content and the presentation is what I'm saying. It can make you introspective. It can make you think. It can move you. It can make you laugh. You can just enjoy the music. You can just enjoy the form. Or if you are of the inclination and you have a background and kind of are inclined to this spiritual content, you can also see the metaphors. It is not that you immediately see the metaphors. And as dancers, we can't say, this is divine. You must understand in the audience that this is divine. No, that's not possible. So you have to make it, as a performer, it's a responsibility to make it accessible without changing the integrity of the form. But you have to say that someone who doesn't understand this must also just experience the show, enjoy it, and leave. So if they don't understand what Krishna is or Yashoda is, or that Krishna is this divinity or this thing or whatever, Krishna and Yashoda, they must just enjoy it. Either way, that Krishna and Yashoda thing they're just expressions of bhakti. It's not like it's some divine story that you're like saying it's the God that came. And it's nonsense. It's like Krishna is stealing butter. That's just entertaining. There's nothing. It's entertaining. It's funny. Right. He steals butter. He's naughty. He looks a thing, which is just a reflection of life, right? And again, what we say is life is beautiful. Like things around us, everything is Ishvara. The smile of that child is divine. The way he is naughty is divine. The love of the mother is divine. So that is what it reflects. And if you understand that and you're ready to understand that, and when you watch it, you will, that's something that you will, kind of gravitate towards. Otherwise, if you Just enjoy watching them and their fight. That's something that's funny just as it is. It's not, so it exists in layers. Like a performance exists in layers. There is a kind of spiritual underlying intention that does exist in all our traditional works and all of that. And we pay kind of, I don't know, we need to acknowledge that and say that this is it. I mean, this is where the form came from. And if you take that out, what are you doing to the form is something that we need to know. So the experience of the audience can happen in different layers, depending on how the performer presents it, how it's choreographed. But it doesn't mean that, and it depends also on the performance and the performer. It doesn't mean that every classical performance and every classical music will suddenly give you this revelation. No, no. It can be badly sung, horribly performed, terribly interpreted. It could be like Devi, and Devi might not even be there. So or it could be about Krishna, and I don't see Krishna, I don't feel anything. So I cannot say that it is from this in particular. Okay. So it can't be like it. I say art in general. So if you have another question, this thing, but then I'll talk about this art in general after that.
Okay. Our next question is, someone has asked, it's very clear that the role of Sanatana Dharma in your life has affected how you connect to and practice and perform Bharatanatyam. So do you think there are other practical aspects of our culture that we need to inculcate into our lifestyle and our life with the same discipline that you have inculcated those into your dance?
That's a very big question, and I'm not any spiritual guru, so I don't know. So I can only say how I'm also struggling to find out how to be a better person. So I don't exactly know what I can say that you need to inculcate in your life, and nobody to, I mean, give that advice. You should you should learn from some Vedantic or some Advaitic thing to learn about that. But I think that I can speak as far as performance or like how I deal with dance is concerned. Um, if you approach your dance or your work with devotion, like you like dancing, because very often we all think of performance, right? So now I'm primarily a performer. Firstly, I'm a performer, then a choreographer and teacher after that. Um, so what do I have now? Like I have no performances for the next year and a half. I should be positively like upset and depressed and devastated. But I'm not at all. Like I honestly, I don't like it doesn't matter to me at all. And I think that if you invest yourself in the work of dance, and performance happens as a kind of, like like an like just like the flower, like you water the tree, and if it doesn't flower, it's not like you don't continue watering it, right? Because you have to continue, and you have to wait, and maybe one day a flower will come, maybe it'll bloom a lot, and then it'll be great, and then all the flowers will fall off one day. So you have to be prepared for all the flowers falling off as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't hold on to that flower because that flower withers really fast.
Right.
Right? You have a performance, a joy, and then it's dead. Last day. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to keep the tree alive. You have to keep your dance alive. You have to keep your art alive. And you can't, the flowers come and they go and then they fall off. And that's absolutely fine. And sometimes they become fruit, sometimes there's no fruit, sometimes just the flower will be there, and sometimes it's half big flowers and someone will pluck it off even before it fruits, it becomes a fruit. So you have to accept these things, and as long as you are working on the tree, it's okay. And you have to know that one day even the tree is going to die.
You're right.
Right? And that's okay. Because you can't define yourself by either this tree or this flower or any of it. So I think that as far as dance is concerned, that's what has kept me um, satisfied with this experience of performance and dance, because I don't think I depend on um, these flowers for the happiness that dance gives
Wow.
me. I think you can apply.
Beautiful metaphor.
Yeah.
So we'll be wrapping up soon. So if you want to talk about,
Yes, I'm going to talk about that. This Indian, like when you said the experience of Indian dance or some other dance, right? So when you say performance, our main intention of performance is rasa, right?
right.
So in classical Indian dance, especially, and theater, all of this, in the Natya Shastra it says that if there is no rasa, the performance is completely wasted.
Right.
Like there is the performance is useless, is what they say, right? And they have very clear techniques of building this rasa, putting it like in thing. We forget that, and we hold on to our technique more than this rasa, right? How often do we think, are we building rasa? Who thinks of this rasa very well all the time are people who create TV shows and scriptwriters for movies. These people think about building up this emotion all the time. This is something that we need to think about as classical performers. How are we building this up through the course of our performance? And will my audience experience something at the end of this? Because otherwise, there is nothing. We're nothing. Like we might as well just dance in our room.
Right.
So it's so if we need to build rasa, and trust me, it doesn't happen all the time. You may do everything and still it won't happen. And your audience will be bored and they'll be like, nice performance. You dance so nicely. And then you'll be like, okay, thanks. Then it's not happened, Or say like, wow, great rhythmic control. You'll be like, thanks. Nothing happened, So, oh, your Aramandi was fantastic. So, when these comments come, you know that the technique is good and you worked on it, but rasa has not happened, right? So when rasa is the main thing, we can't say any art form takes precedence over the other. We can't say because we're classical dancers, we are better. I've experienced rasa when watching modern dance. I've experienced rasa when watching a contemporary performance. I've experienced rasa in a Carnatic music concert, in Bharatanatyam shows, in Odissi. Like you can experience it from any form of art. I actually sometimes I have a lot of contemporary art, like visual contemporary physical art. I don't get, and I'm like, I don't get it. I'm not thing. But even with my aversion, sometimes I went into this museum in Amsterdam, and they had an installation. I don't know what it is about the installation. I just cannot get it out of my mind. The colors or the lights, or I don't even know who the artist is, but I remember it like vividly. And can you say that I didn't experience rasa just because it's contemporary art? That's not fair to say, So as an artist, I think it's important to respect all art forms. This may be our chosen art form. This may be because this is closer to our culture. It's always easier for us to understand the intent of an art form that comes from your own culture, because it has certain intentions or certain underlying ideas that you're close to. And so it is definitely easier for me, which is probably why I came back to India to do Bharatanatyam instead of staying in New York and trying to work with a modern company or something like that, because this is something that I felt closer to, that I would be able to flower in. So in that respect, I don't think that any art form becomes better or worse. It's for us to choose and know what speaks to us, and whatever the art form is, give it its due, learn it fully. Don't like, if you're learning hip hop, learn it properly. Like, learn where it came from, why, what's the intention, how. And you can be and you think hip hop can't give you rasa? Of course it can. So it doesn't mean that uh, it, it becomes, yeah, suddenly this is amazing and this is worse. And it's your choice as a performer to choose whatever. And as a Bharatanatyam dancer or a classical Indian dancer, there is a certain spiritual underlaying that is already there within the form, of movement, within our gestural vocabulary, the lyrics we normally use. It's not about personal angst or upset or sorrow or depression or something like that, that is infused into the physical vocabulary as well, which is there in many other forms, and that's perfectly valid. We can't reject it or say this is better or this is worse. We just understand this is what it is, and this is what I would like to do, or this is what I'm inclined toward. Now, just going with the idea of rasa, and I'll say why rasa from any art is the same. That's what I would like to make a point. This goes beyond lyrics or content or anything that you say. Essentially, rasa is something like you experience happiness or experience sorrow or something like that, right? When you watch a performance, or you experience like this anger towards this person who has done something so evil, or who is an abuser or something, like, I wish he would just, and you have this anger towards it. And at the end of the performance, when you've experienced this rasa, you're left with this, like, a relief, right? As an audience member. It's because you experience an emotion that you are not attached to. It is not your own, right? And in my opinion, this is what I have understood that Vedanta talks about, is that even in life, when we experience emotion that we are not attached to, that's the purpose of right living. So when we're not attached to something, and performance and art is a great way to have momentary experience of how actually our lives should be. So if we're able to take decisions of, I don't know, like with Guru or Shishya, let's say, since we were discussing that topic, we're able to, your student is like not dancing properly. If you can be upset for the sake of the student, not because you are genuinely upset and you're not attached to it, then you'll do well as a teacher. Right? If I show my upset and I say, why are you dancing not properly? Do it again. And then I'm fine. I'm actually not angry. So then, which is really hard, it's really great to say it, in performance, it's fine. So I think this happens both as the audience member and as a performer, because as a performer, I can take on Radha's sorrow, and then I just switch out. I'll be really sad as Radha, and then I switch out, and then I can be something else. So even that emotion is not something that I am attached to personally. Like, it's not attached to me, and I don't carry it out. So I think any art form has that capacity to transcend the world that you live in, and that's why we gravitate towards art. So we can't say we are exposing divinity because we are just classical performers. Yes, the content we have has a spiritual underlying thing. But as a performer, anybody who brings rasa, they're all the same.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rukmini ji. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. It's been an incredible discussion hearing you and listening to all that you have experienced, as well as your thoughts on the art form. With that, I'll turn it over to Tanmay.
Thank you, Rukmini ji, for speaking about this phenomenal topic and sharing your perspectives and joining us so early in the morning all the way from Bangalore. And thank you, Anjali, for being our moderator for this webinar. We hope you all enjoyed learning about the classical arts. We would quickly like to present our topic for next week, which is Beauty Beyond the Bindi, a Hindu perspective on modern fashion. Our speaker is the very well-known social media fashion blogger, Shruti Jayadevan, who will be sharing her insights on this vast topic. Join us next week for our third webinar. Thank you all for joining. Shubharatri and Namaste.
Thank you.